Well, it sure was good of old man Huckleberry to let us use his haunted cabin for our Halloween shoot. It's a coincidence that it looks a lot like our normal set.
The Coast Guard finally lifted their blockade. We got the keys back, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and if you see any ghosts around us in the background, just leave a comment because they're real ghosts. They're real ghosts. Do you think they bought it? Well, Avery, we are concluding our Halloween adventure, our first October here in the Green Corner, with a bang, watching the 1979 classic Phantasm to wrap up. Oh my God! To wrap up the.
That was a ghost.
Yeah, that was a ghost. Everyone out there. To wrap up our spooky October. So yeah, 1979 Phantasm. This was my pick.
It was.
You had never seen...
I was not aware in the slightest sense that this movie existed or of any impact it had on society.
Yeah, and normally when we go through our selection criteria part of the show, I have some story.
Right.
It was my great-grand uncle's nephew's favorite movie.
This wasn't Uncle Huckleberry's favorite movie?
It wasn't Uncle Huckleberry's favorite.
Established canon now. We got to go with it.
We got to. It was not. This is a movie that, despite being my pick, I knew almost nothing about. There's a couple of reasons I was interested in it. First of all, I got the sense it would be a good Halloween movie. It had the right stuff going on from the cover, from the few images I had seen. And although it's not a movie set around Halloween, it's a spooky old school horror movie, so it fit that aesthetic. But yeah, I really knew nothing about it. I knew about the silver ball,
right,
which was a greater payoff than I ever could have expected for a silver ball. I did not know that that's what happened with the silver ball.
Right.
I thought it just floated around, so that was a nice little surprise. And the cover of the movie is a beautiful illustrated painted cover that I've seen on VHS boxes just in my life, and I was always curious what it was and who the tall man was with the weird hair on the front cover. So I was always a little bit curious about, it just had one of those covers that kind of draws you in. The last thing that drew me to this movie is that there are 5 of them.
Yeah.
All the way up to 2016. These are still getting made, predominantly with the same actors and the same writer-director all the way up to the 4th one, I believe. Yeah, the 4th one had the same, 2, 3, 4 have the same writer-director, and then one came out in 2016 that he wrote, but they pretty much all have the same actors in them. And I'm always just fascinated by discovering a franchise that I not only haven't seen any movies from, but I've never even heard of or know anything about. And it's cool to me to kind of go back and dig up these old franchises and discover them. I've done, this Halloween, I'm working through the Halloween movies. A lot of people have done that.
Yeah.
Kind of curious what the Phantasm series had to offer.
I have to admit, the fact that it has this many movies and is apparently not reached my radar beyond Hellraiser, Leprechaun, Tales from the Hood. The bar seems pretty low for me to have at least heard of a series with 5 movies.
Yeah.
And I hadn't.
And I think a big reason for that is that they're kind of an isolated island. The writer-director has pretty much only made these. He made Beastmaster,
right,
and then made these. And that's pretty much been his whole career. Almost none of the actors have done anything of note other than these movies.
No.
So it kind of lived on an island. I feel like the reason a lot of other big franchises branch out, have the notoriety, is one actor. Your Jamie Lee Curtis goes off and has this huge career, right? So it's it's not living on this island. John Carpenter made lots of other movies. Because this is isolated. They never did anything but this. Yeah. It's the truest cult following ever. Because it's you have to like this, you would never stumble across it by accident otherwise.
It's a little bit intergalactic TV. It kind of feels like it's from another dimension.
It does.
That it's just, you're just kind of seeing something you shouldn't be.
Yeah.
That was a little bit the vibe. So I think it was definitely an interesting pick that was with a lot of variance to it, I suppose.
Yeah. You don't know what you're going to get in this movie.
No.
I certainly didn't. But anyway, it was my pick, so it's time for you to give me your first thoughts. So first impressions on Phantasm.
First impressions are that I'm a little annoyed that you conned me into reviewing an episode of Twin Peaks.
I have a couple notes about Twin Peaks.
This came out before anything David Lynch. No, I guess Eraserhead came out a little before, but this was already in production.
Yeah.
I think Eraserhead was 2 years before. There was obviously heavy intermingling of influence. I'm sure David Lynch loves this movie, and I'm sure Don Coscarelli loves Twin Peaks. I mean, and just kind of naturally, because a lot of the most interesting parts of the movie were very Twin Peaksy. I think we can safely predict you're going to like this one better than I did.
Yeah. And I just want to say, I didn't know that when I picked it.
Yeah.
I thought this was going to be way more traditional slasher kind of movie. I had no idea it would be as experimental and weird, but I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the headline version for me are that I didn't have a great time watching this movie, but I get why some people really enjoy it. I think there definitely are some very interesting and creative little nuggets in there. And I think certain people will love this movie.
Yeah.
I think there is some stuff in there that you just won't get anywhere else, even today, that I think is interesting and worth talking about.
Yeah. And I think I'm one of those people.
Yeah.
Because I love this movie. It's not to say it's not without its faults. I was getting some serious... I've been watching a lot of older horror movies this Halloween, going back 70s and 80s.
Right.
So I've been watching a lot of like the Spanish and Italian dub horror movies, which is when you get the really weird stuff, because like it's usually like an Italian filmmaker or a Spanish filmmaker trying to make a movie set in America, and they don't really know how America works, so it's like nothing quite lines up. This isn't that. It's made by an American guy. I think he was born in North Africa, but then moved to the US when he was really young. It feels like that. It's not, but it has that aesthetic of like, it's kind of alien. It kind of doesn't quite get how things normally go.
Well, I just don't get off on funerals, man. They give me the creeps.
Which I liked, but...
Yeah, the way that I read it was that the director, Don Coscarelli, I think, I might be saying that wrong.
I wrote
Something
it down somewhere.
like that.
Yeah, Don Coscarelli.
Don Coscarelli. He again, kind of did the David Lynch thing. He just punted on a bunch of stuff he didn't want to do. So just a lot of the scenes don't really connect, and the characters don't really do anything, but it doesn't feel like an inept filmmaking. It just feels like he didn't care. And he just put the things that interested him in the movie.
Oh, so you're saying the stuff he cared about, he tried.
Yeah.
And all the other scenes, he just kind of...
There's a bunch of just basic parts of a movie that just aren't in this,
Yeah.
or that are just that no effort is put in.
Yeah.
Which makes it a bit of a unique experience, for sure.
Well, I think that's... When I talk... Like, I love this movie. The highlights make it for me. The aesthetic is all there. This is the kind of movie I will definitely rewatch. The score ties it together for me. I think it's got a really great synth organ kind of score going on. And that theme is woven out through the whole movie. So like, this is a movie I will rewatch around Halloween again. I think it's really solid and it's visually striking. And then there's all these scenes where the brother's at a bar picking up a chick, or there's a weird jam session that doesn't belong in the movie. And those scenes, I agree with you. I'm like, what's going on right now? And I was trying to take notes on the plot, and I'm like, oh my god, he's moving around a lot of places here.
Yeah.
But then like the last 30 minutes to me were just knocked it out of the park. Like just the last 30 minutes were exactly what the filmmaker wanted to make the whole movie, but he had to fill in the other scenes that are compulsory, which are probably the ones you're kind of annoyed by.
Yeah, and annoyed isn't even the right word. I mean, I am, but it was more just a case of this guy didn't have any interest in making a conventional movie, right? And that's gonna have the effect that it has. I think one of the best examples that during some of the exposition scenes, characters are just teleporting around, and it was so weird and off-putting, and like deliberately makes you not listen to the exposition. So like, where?
Yeah, we'll get into some of that because there's a lot of scenes where I had no idea where they were or why they were doing what they were doing. Eventually, I stopped caring, and the end of the movie, although this is going to be spoilers, I'm not going to spoil the end quite yet.
Right.
It kind of repaired a lot of that when you realize what this all actually was, and it actually like improved it in a way for me where it like, we'll get to the ending. The ending, you could say it's a cop-out. To me, it actually improved the film. It's kind of right on the fence.
Yeah.
But I think this movie is visually striking. Like, visually, there's a bunch of scenes that if I had seen this when I was a kid, it would have stuck in my head. There are, like, individual shots that just I was thinking about last night after watching it, because there's a lot of iconography, I suppose. The score is really good. The performances aren't great outside of the tall man, who gives a weird performance, but a striking one. Like, you're gonna remember that.
Yeah.
The young brother is actually pretty solid. The older brother's 70s man. He's not really anything.
You're damn right.
But this is a movie it's like nothing I've ever seen. which is a rare gem to find from the 70s, because most films you watch from this era have been copied. And Halloween, as much as I love that movie, there's no twists in that movie. You know exactly what's going to happen because it defined what a slasher was. This movie came out a year after Halloween, and no one has ever done anything like it, and I had no idea where it was going at any point.
Yeah.
And I have to give the movie props for that. And it never got so weird that I lost interest, because it's 90 minutes, so even by the end, I wasn't like, let's wrap this up. I was still like, what?
Well, should we get into the old deep dive?
I guess we should deep dive. As always, full spoiler warning for Phantasm. It came out in 1979, so you're probably, if you were gonna watch this, you probably have, but spoiler warning for Phantasm. Our movie opens with two youths having sex in a graveyard,
Classic.
as you do. We've all been there.
I wanted to call out some geometric oddities to the way they're having sex. When it was cutting scene to scene, it's like their legs on top of each other, and then she's above him, and then just shot to shot. It didn't track.
I also don't know how the sex is having happened in the scene, but...
And the guy laying completely motionless, like, to the degree, like, his whole upper body is still... Anyway,
yeah,
it's good.
I mean, the key here is not just that the geometry doesn't make any sense, but that the girl stabs him in the chest and he dies, and then she transforms into an old man, the tall man.
Does that happen here? I thought that happened later.
It happens both times.
Oh, okay, all right.
So she does transform into the tall man in this scene, and I was like, oh.
Yeah, she does.
I was like, oh, so that's... It started strong for me, because I'm like, if we're already having an old man disguised as a young girl having sex in a graveyard... This movie's gonna do some weird stuff. We're not starting out with the teenagers going to summer camp.
Yeah.
We're starting in a weird place.
Hi, Reg. How's it going? Tommy's gone.
He gets killed. Turns out this guy who was killed was named Tommy. So we cut to the funeral. The funeral where his friends Toby and Reggie are going to the funeral together.
Jody.
Is it Jody?
It's Jody.
All my notes are wrong.
They say it, that's like the only name they say in the movie.
Jody. Hi, Reg.
You know what? You might be right. It's probably Jody. Avery's 99% correct here. Jody and Reggie.
Jody.
Reggie, who's I just thought was Joe Latrugio. I don't know what the fact that Reggie and Jody are like best friends, but Reggie is 30 years older and he's bald and has a ponytail and is an ice cream man.
It's
a choice.
Yeah, I mean, my note for the next scene is just Baldy and the hair talk. Because you just get this great visual contrast to the two guys, and that was the most interesting thing for me in a lot of the movie.
Yeah. Jody wanders around the mausoleum. And the mausoleum is great set design. It's these white marble walls. Again, I think huge Twin Peaks influence, like this influencing Twin Peaks in a big way.
David Bowie showing up would have been not out of place.
Would have been peak.
Yeah.
He's wandering around. Well, he's wandering around the mausoleum. He's hearing little chattering and seeing little I wrote down boogans every time.
Every time.
You wrote boogans as well?
Yeah.
So the boogans are running around. Jody's little brother Michael is also riding a motorcycle around the graveyard. He's also hearing the boogans.
Yep.
Give us some grace. This movie, a lot of just stuff happens, so recounting the plot's gonna be a little tricky, but we're gonna work on it.
If someone were to read my notes and try to, like, each individual line and try to piece together a movie, each individual line is just a thing happens that's not connected to any other things.
Yep, and I have the most notes for this movie of any movie, despite it being the shortest.
Yeah.
This is the first time when he's kind of wandering around the mausoleum, we do meet the tall man. I think he gets one line, but it's effective. It actually made me jump. The tall man is probably like the most memorable thing from this movie as an icon. His performance is really strong.
He's on the poster. Old Angus Scrim.
Angus Scrim.
Which is a stage name, I read.
Yes.
But a darn good one and an appropriate one.
Really good.
So he gives he taps Jody on the shoulder, tells him, "The funeral is about to begin."
The funeral is about to begin, sir.
While the funeral's going on, Mike, the little brother, is outside in the cemetery. He's not invited to the funeral because it's revealed to us that his parents, him and Jody's parents, died recently. So Jody doesn't want him going to the funeral because he'll have nightmares.
After Mom and Dad's funeral, he had nightmares for weeks.
So Michael's out in the graveyard and sees the tall man after the funeral putting the coffin of Tommy into his car after the funeral by himself. Basically grave robbing, I guess is what he sees. And this was the first time where I'm like, okay, what's going on?
I had to second guess because I genuinely wasn't sure if a low-budget movie from the 70s knew how heavy a coffin was.
I thought that too, but the scene before shows 5 men carrying it.
It does, but if they just like move on and we're just like, yeah, a guy can lift a coffin, it's fine.
Right.
I would have believed it. They don't.
They don't. The tall man is supernaturally strong.
Yeah.
Michael sees it. There's a great little moment here when Michael's looking through the binoculars and mouths, "What the f***?"
Yeah.
As Michael leaves the funeral, we get our most David Lynch moment. To me, this is the most David Lynch moment coming up. He goes to visit a psychic.
Yeah.
And the psychic is an old lady in a wheelchair that looks like Ozzy Osbourne.
Yep.
And her granddaughter, who's like a young blonde lady, talks on behalf of her grandmother.
And I'm going to tell you, there were not a lot of awesome performances in this movie. That granddaughter, oh boy.
Yeah, they found her down at the grocery store and asked her to be in the movie because she's not good.
Oh man.
Don't fear, Michael.
I can't get my hand out.
Don't fear.
This scene is also not only David Lynchy. There's a specific David Lynch Twin Peaks scene that this is almost exactly like. When Donna's dropping off food, which I'll put here.
No. My grandson is studying magic.
This is also a huge Dune reference. Did
Yeah.
you got this immediately?
I did get it immediately. This was back when Dune was just a book, of course.
Yes.
Grandmother wants to play a little game.
Wow, how'd you do that?
Put your hand in the box.
So yes, this was an obvious Dune reference. I don't know if you caught it, but later on, they're in front of Dune Tavern.
Dune Cantina.
Something like that, which that was enough for me to be like, okay, he's just putting his favorite book in and it's not mainstream.
Well, what's really weird is that David Lynch would go on to direct Dune.
Yeah.
So the crossovers never end.
Yeah, it's a mess. But for me, it's just, I don't know what this scene is. This scene threw me off the trail of the movie so much because it just doesn't relate to anything or come back up. That there's just an old fortune teller woman.
That doesn't come back up, but the concept of conquering fear does.
Does it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I actually have a lot of notes on because I thought this movie would be aimless visual fun.
Mm-hmm.
The end of the movie tied a nice ribbon on this actually having a theme to me. And this is an important scene to establish it, which is that the brother, Mike, is trying to conquer his fears. This whole movie is about a boy, a coming-of-age story basically about a boy who's recently lost his parents and doesn't know what to do and is scared all the time. And about him conquering his fears and those fears manifesting as all the conflicts he sees in this movie, to me. And this scene establishes the theme of conquering fear, done through a Dune reference, but the idea of the pain you're feeling isn't real and your responsibility is to basically suck it up and be a man, which is kind of the journey Mike would take. So I think thematically it lands. Don't know why it was a fortune teller. That didn't need to happen.
No.
But thematically, I thought it worked.
I want to call it specifically that what he was asking the fortune teller about was that Jody is leaving.
I mean, as it is, he follows me everywhere. It's like he knows I'm gonna leave. He's a tough little kid. I love him.
Yeah.
His brother is leaving, which is the specific thing he was stressed about, which I'm kind of just realizing the significance of now.
Yeah.
But
I think do we spoil the end now? I think it makes the movie more
this
interesting.
movie just doesn't logically come to a head in order. So I guess.
The end of the no, let's not do it.
Okay.
Let's not do it.
Okay.
Wait till the end to figure out the twist.
Yeah, you fell for it. You thought we were going to. Not yet. You gotta watch till the end. Like and subscribe.
So yeah, I think we should explain the Dune thing. Obviously, in Dune, there's the Jom Gabar, which is the test that the Bene Gesserit give Paul, which is put your hand in a black box, and if you can keep your hand in the box even through excruciating pain, then you're human. If you cave into your fear and pull the hand out, then you're an animal. And that scene happens exactly in here. Basically, he puts his hand in the box, feels pain, has to pull it out, and it's just the Dune scene.
Doesn't she literally say fear is the mind killer?
She doesn't say it all. It's so close.
Yeah.
It's like fear is the killer. Like
Yeah.
it's basically fear is the mind killer. They almost say it verbatim.
It was simply reflection. Fear is the killer. That's what grandmother wants you to learn.
I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration.
What the heck happens next?
Next is the scene of Reggie and Jody playing guitar on the porch. And I think Reggie, just the actual guy, just likes playing guitar. It was just
it
like
was
doing
really
it.
good. Like it was a good song. I was shocked how good the song was.
Yeah, I'm sure Reggie's just like an actual guitarist. His real name's Reggie. I don't think he like invented a character for this. So they might have not even known they were filming.
Baby left me blue.
They just jam on the porch.
But they give a little bit of foreshadowing here because they zoom in on the tuning fork, which you don't use for guitars really. Maybe you did in the 70s.
Like to sing? Like maybe to tune, like
guess.
to get in key?
But they zoom in to let you know that Reggie knows what a tuning fork is.
And I wish I could say that comes back in a big way. It does, but it doesn't help or make any sense what it does. So, but the
No.
tuning fork is established at this point as a thing. We'll get to the tuning fork. The tuning fork is very important to the end of this movie for a very confusing reason that I still haven't figured out.
Yeah.
Um,
It technically meets the definition of a setup and payoff, but
All right. We're hot as love, you know.
funnily enough, I read in the trivia that apparently there was a cut plot line of Jody working at the bank, and there was like a whole thing with like his boss that they just took out. And so officially in the movie, Jody is a musician and that's his job. And I think that kind of, but I think they had to like, once they cut all the bank stuff, they had to put like 5 minutes of him playing music back in. And I think that's part of why this scene happened.
yeah, they have a weird hang up with jobs because Reggie's an ice cream man.
Yeah.
Which is like, I guess a full-time job,
Yeah.
but very
For the-
strange choice.
For the 8 people in this town.
Yeah, they make it come up in the plot like twice that he's an ice cream man, so
I think
they
just
use it.
had an ice cream truck.
Yeah, the set
like-
the production value is too good to pass up on.
Yeah.
After this scene, we're on to our next scene where the psychic's granddaughter, the worst actress in the world, goes to the mausoleum with flowers, knocks on the door, the big mysterious door at the end of the hall that we don't find out what's in too much later, and then screams, and then we never see her again.
I didn't even write this scene down.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why she went to the mausoleum. I assumed, if anything, the psychic was in cahoots with the tall man.
Mm-hmm.
We never see her again. It's just another scene. It just happens.
The original cut of this movie was, I think, almost 4 hours.
Yes, I did read that.
And you get that a little bit.
This was one of the only scenes to me that like stuck out as like this just didn't need to be in the movie. Almost every other scene like does something.
Yeah.
This scene was just like, it's just nothing. It's just nothing there.
Mm-hmm.
Jody goes to Dune's cantina, where he immediately picks up a chick.
Mm-hmm.
Like, with I think he says 2 words. Michael's watching through the window. He picks up a chick and goes to have sex with her in the graveyard.
Right. Well, this is, I believe, the lady from the start, right?
Is it the same lady? That would make a lot of sense.
The same lady. Yeah.
Okay.
It's the lavender dressed woman who is also the tall man.
Right.
And yeah, they head to the graveyard.
I feel
because
very
why wouldn't
stupid
they?
for not realizing it was the same one. That makes so much more sense. But
There's like 6 actors in
yeah,
this movie.
I don't know. She's on the poster. She's a bigger character on the poster than Michael.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense. But it's his idea to go to the graveyard, not hers.
Yeah. Well, you know, I gotta get to the graveyard.
That's where you have sex.
Yeah,
in
that's
the
what makes
graveyard.
sense. What are you gonna do it in your house? Weirdo.
In the house you have with no parents.
And there's a
This is, kind of spooky, isn't it?
No, it's exciting.
So they hook up in the graveyard. Michael, who's watching from the bushes, sees a boogans, which is a word we're going to keep using.
Yeah.
He sees a boogans and is chased out, runs past them, and this was my biggest laugh of the movie, that Jody turns around with just a pair of panties in his mouth. and delivers like 5 lines. Like, oh, that was weird. What? Like,
It's just like, he's got something going on.
What the heck? Wait here, it's my little brother. I think he's got some kind of a problem.
We should do the dialogue in this movie is amazing, and I mean
man.
like amazingly bad. Like there's some lines I'm gonna quote because there's when he gets chased away by the boogans, the Jawa, whatever you want to call it. He says, "I was chased by something that was little and brown and low to the ground."
yeah.
I don't know. It was little and brown and low to the ground.
It's probably just a gopher in heat.
Not to mention that when Michael's peeping on them with binoculars in the graveyard, there's a synchronized wow when her boobs come out between the two brothers. Like a psychic wow when the boobs are shown.
Wow.
Michael goes home and has a nightmare. And I think this is a clear bookmark for me in the movie, of the movie doing great work, as a contrasting bad work.
Right.
The nightmare with Michael is a beautiful 20-second scene where he wakes up and the tall man is standing over his bed and zombie arms reach out of the ground. It is perfectly lit. This is like a painting.
Yeah.
This is what you come to this movie for, is scenes like this. And this was like genuinely got a little jump from me. If I was a kid, this would have traumatized me. I think it's still effectively scary for a 70s movie, like taking into context. This is the scene, this is the stuff I'm here for. I love it. Everything before this scene, I was kind of like, whoa, is this like a real movie? Is this going to be a real movie? And then this scene, I'm like, okay, there's some artistry here. There's care and love. He just picked his battles about what he cared about.
That's exactly how I feel about the movie. I think that's a great line. He picked what he cared about. This movie did feel like he almost wanted it to be just a series of vignettes. Like, if you told me he didn't want to have dialogue in this movie, or he wanted it in black and white, because there's the moment with the sphere coming up, the orb. There's there's a few moments we'll get to where it's obvious that he had a very clear vision, put a lot of work into the set design and, like you said, lighting and music, and they're really effective. And then it's just they don't tie together into a movie.
Well, and that's what feels Lynchian. Is he said the inspiration for this movie, the director and writer, was that he had a dream, a recurring nightmare about being a kid stuck in the white marble mausoleum. And it kind of, that was the seed of his idea, right?
Yeah.
And Lynch does the same thing. He'll have a dream, a subconscious idea, and spin a whole narrative out of it that just weaves in themes, but subconsciously. He's not trying to do a specific thing. It's just like him extrapolating on a feeling, an emotion. And that's what this guy did, because that makes a lot of sense. The movie feels like a dream. Like, it feels like someone expanding upon the seed of a nightmare.
Yeah.
Another great scene coming up right now is Mike's wandering around downtown and sees the tall man like out on Main Street, walking down the street. And the score kicks in. He's walking in slow-mo. It's a beautiful shot. And the tall man's walking, I'm pretty sure, where you do the arm at the same cadence as the leg. Like, not how humans walk. So it's not alternating, it's like one after the other. So it has this like inhuman quality to it.
His physical acting is really good through the movie. He definitely sells otherworldly being, but nondescript one very well.
And he's not like a decrepit old man.
No.
He's like strutting. Like he's kind of got a power to him almost.
And I think this is the part he walks by the ice cream truck, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
And there's like a really weird moment where some of the cold steam goes by him and he sniffs it.
He does like a
yeah, he like turns and you can't even tell if he's
and it's unclear if he's in pain or he like loves it.
Yeah, like I was kind of being like, he's a mortician. I guess he likes cold stuff. I don't know.
Yeah. But
it was emotionally effective, but
it makes him feel otherworldly.
Yeah.
It's if you were a kid and you saw an old person do that, no other old person's gonna care, but you're like, that was weird, right?
Yeah.
That was a weird thing for a guy to do. Mike decides he needs to go investigate what's going on at Morningside, which is the name of the cemetery and mausoleum?
Mortuary.
Mortuary, yeah.
And mausoleum, yeah.
So he grabs like a nice big Bowie knife, he puts it in his sock, and he sneaks into Morningside. This is probably one of the most effective sequences in the movie, is him sneaking into Morningside.
Mm-hmm.
He's lurking around. He sneaks into this room with all the coffins and hides in a coffin, and there's a beautiful shot, POV shot from the coffin as like a zombie guy's wandering in, and right before he opens it, the tall man calls him back and he leaves. I found that to be genuinely tense.
Yeah, that was a good little moment of suspense. What did you assume that guy was? The caretaker, I think is what he's called.
I assumed it was just a caretaker
Okay.
until much later in the movie.
Yeah.
I didn't think too much of it.
I thought it was the tall man wearing a different outfit. They don't really show his face, and he's kind of got similar hair.
Yeah.
It's like if you pay attention, it's not, but there was no establishing of who this second person is. I don't know, he's either like another tall man. He's just some guy.
They needed a guy to get silver balled.
Yeah.
So yeah, he gets silver balled, because that's the next thing that happens. Michael's wandering around the mausoleum, and the silver ball flies out. Silver ball is one of the few things I knew about this movie. Just because on the cover, it's like a giant silver ball. There's even a guy, I don't know if you saw this, there's a guy credited on this movie just for making the silver ball. That was his whole thing, and they paid him $1,000.
It was a big part of this movie, and it seems like one of the drivers for why they made it. And it was good.
The silver ball flies at the caretaker guy. It has an amazing death. I did not think that there would be this level of gore in this movie. I just didn't think it would happen. It seems kind of like more kid-friendly
It was
horror.
pretty much the scene of, what was it, Ben Stiller dying in Tropic Thunder?
Yeah.
Where there's just this like stream of blood, like a fire hose
Like a
shoots out of him.
comedy level of blood.
Yeah, I don't know if that was scary in 1979. Maybe.
I think this pushes into the absurd on purpose.
Okay.
But I will say, like, it was pretty good effect of the drilling into his head first.
Yeah.
Like, it was a great effect.
The ball hitting him, that's obviously just a reversed shot.
Yeah.
And you kind of know if you're looking for it, but it was fine. And the ball thing is scary enough, I guess. And it really kind of sells, like, until this point, it's this tall, odd man, and I was kind of picturing, like, is he going to come after them, like, with an axe?
Right.
Right? Is he going to, like, drive over them with a truck? And it's like, no, okay, we're going there.
There's a silver ball.
Yeah. And that really, well, I've said, one of the most effective things that horror does for me is kind of unsettling you in terms of you don't know where the threats are coming from.
Yeah.
And I guess this was a great example of that.
Yeah.
Where they kind of expand the scope of what might happen in the rest of the movie so much by having this little ball. Because until now, it's just, there's a guy and he might have a dog or something.
Yeah, like you don't know, and then you get the silver ball.
Yeah.
You get like it keeps doing that as the
Yeah.
movie goes on. It keeps introducing things that the tall man has at his disposal that are scary, which feels very kid-like nightmare. Like,
Yeah.
There's things you would come up with as a kid is like a silver ball that's gonna fly around and stab me in the head. That's not something that like a committee of adults
No.
would decide to put in a movie.
It did feel very, you've seen more of this than I have, but Hellraiser as
Yeah.
well, where there's just like weird monsters and
Yeah.
artifacts that just kind of don't really have any logic or consistency and are unsettling in that way.
Yeah, like strong otherworldly set design. I think I got a bit of Hellraiser vibes. I could definitely see that.
A little less like ostentatious, obviously, with the villain. And it seems like the tall man is more interested in his own goals, whereas Hellraiser's whole thing is messing with people more so.
Pinhead.
Yeah, it seems like Pinhead and the tall man might like know each other.
Yeah, they could be from the same
They like
planet or universe.
they don't get along.
No.
They know about each other.
Yeah, they're like at the monster mixer.
Yeah.
And they're like, how things?
Okay, so after the ball gets the caretaker and shoots all of his head blood 11 meters away,
And causes him to piss his pants.
he does pee his pants on camera, which I also imagine did not happen a lot in real movies in the 70s.
No, I was shocked by the pee.
It still doesn't happen. You don't see pee, like
don't-
actual pee in movies that
No,
much.
like instant death pee.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's one of those trivia facts that like whenever anyone dies, they immediately pee and poo themselves.
Yeah.
Doesn't make it into a lot of movies for good reason.
No, this guy did it.
Yeah, you did it.
He might have pooped himself.
He might have. And then we have the tall man chases Michael into a little warehouse and gets his hand closed in the door, which this was great. I did really like this. Yeah. So he gets his hand closed in the door, it's a wiggling, and then Michael cuts his fingers off, which immediately shoots out a bunch of mustard.
It's just mustard.
It's just mustard.
It gets mustardy, more mustardy as the movie goes along, where they just give up and it's just actually mustard like at one point.
Which is fun. I mean, that again is just kind of some world building, right? You have a lot of questions. You're like, whoa, okay, fair enough. He's not too bothered about his hand getting cut off, but the fact that it's yellow stuff.
Yeah.
Now you're like, is this an alien?
Yeah. What is going on here?
Yeah. But the finger remains alive.
Yeah.
And he catches it in a little box and takes it home with him, as you do.
I loved every scene where the tall man is chasing Michael, because to me it felt like in a nightmare. Like when you're getting chased, It was very, I guess I'll say this, in a lot of horror movies when kids are getting chased, there's really no sense of danger.
Right.
It feels very like they're not going to catch them. If they do, they're just going to like put them in a sack. Like it's very low threat. With the tall man's chasing him, he's like sprinting and he's really scary.
Yeah.
And it's like, I would be terrified if I was a kid and like the thought of this guy just chasing me down a hallway.
And the fact that the rules for him aren't established. Because if you have like a werewolf chasing a kid, you're like, okay, it's this giant monster that can run at 30 miles an hour. That makes it kind of tough to do the chase scene. Yeah. And like, I know what it can do. And it's either he's going to die or there's like a Deus Ex and he gets behind the door. The tall man, you have no idea.
Yeah.
And when he's like running kind of awkwardly, you're like, yeah, I guess that's the best he's got right now.
Can he fly?
Yeah.
I don't know. We don't know. So he gets home with a severed finger.
He barely escapes one of the little boogans, which there's a very cool, one of my favorite effects in the movie where there's like a bunch of little hands that grab it at his ankle when he's climbing out the window. Yeah. It was lit appropriately that you were, because before I genuinely was like, is this just a dog?
Right.
Or like a Jawa? It's one of those things. And then this was the first like, oh, there's more to it. It's something.
And when they reveal what it is, we'll get to it.
This was the high point of my interest in the dwarves, I think they call them.
They are officially the dwarves. We call them the boogans here in the green corner. So he gets home with his box with the severed finger full of mustard.
And then my favorite bit of teleporting exposition, as I'm going to coin it, when he's explaining what happened to Jody, sentence to sentence, they just move inside and outside of the house and then upstairs and then into the living room for no reason.
Oh, I gotta talk to you.
And it's in that box.
Yep. I was spying on Tommy's funeral from the groves with your binoculars.
Yeah. Well, I also think I read that they shot this only on weekends over the course of a year because he didn't want to pay for 3 days of camera rentals. So we rented on the Friday and returned on Monday, so we only had to pay for 1 day of rentals. So they definitely shot these out of order. Like, they definitely picked up shots when they could, when they had access to grandma's house to shoot the movie.
And then cut it down from 4 hours with no reshoots in the budget.
Yep. But I mean, I appreciate that. Like, this was really a guy making the movie he wanted to make. And these little quirks, I forgive them when the product is purely his vision. It's like exactly what he wanted to put out there.
Well, I can't figure this thing out.
At this point, the finger is shown. The finger then, to the brother, to Jody, the finger then becomes an evil fly.
A little Langolier thing.
Yeah, like a beetle with red eyes that they put in the trash, the sink trash.
The garbage disposal.
Garbage disposal, which doesn't kill it, so then they have to stab it with a knife also.
Yeah.
Joe Latrugio sees all of this.
Right.
And now he's on board as well. He knows what's going on. Would you call him No Hair?
Yeah. I said baldy in the hair.
Okay. Yeah, at home, if you want to follow along, you can either call him Reggie, you can call him Joe Latrugio, or No Hair. Yeah. Those are your choices. Or Ice Cream Man. That also would satisfy us.
Hey, Mike, you want to ride along with me today? It's pretty warm outside, and the ice cream's going to be flying fast and furious.
Jody, who I wrote every single time in my notes is Toby.
Right.
So I'm doing a lot of mental gymnastics here. He decides, okay, the finger was severed and became mustard and then became an evil fly, so I actually believe you. I'm going to go investigate Morningside. This felt a little bit repetitive since Michael just investigated Morningside. Now Jody's going to go investigate Morningside.
A different movie would have made this some sort of interesting conflict where Jody doesn't believe Michael and no one believes Michael, and
well, they do that for like one scene.
Yeah,
And
they
then they do
that was kind of one of those things that it seems like someone gave him the note that there should be some sort of character conflict, and so he's like, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, I believe you. Jesus.
But they actually refrained from keeping it repetitive since Jody's foray into investigating Morningside goes much worse. He gets into the first room through the window, attacked by a Boogans, and shoots him in the funniest way I could possibly imagine, where the Boogans is on his back. He takes out his pistol and just aims roughly at where the Boogans might be on his head and shoots. As Jody's running away from Morningside, Mike shows up in a car. Jody almost shoots him in the head because he's just ready to blast, apparently.
I started blasting. Bah! Bah! Well, I don't see so good, so I missed. Then they ran away. I ran after them.
So Mike gets him in the car and they start driving away. They're being pursued by a car and they keep saying, no one's driving the car. It's like a ghost. So I'm like, oh, it's like a ghost car.
Yeah.
Turns out it just had a little person driving it so they couldn't see him.
Yeah.
But despite not knowing there wasn't someone driving the car, they shoot at where the driver would be with a shotgun, which I also thought was hilarious. You're just shooting at nothing. They eventually do actually shoot the engine, the car blows up and crashes. And
Yeah.
this is where we learn that the dwarves, the dwarves, who was driving the car, they go and investigate the body, and it's Tommy from the beginning of the movie.
I remember that name.
It's Tommy.
Tommy.
So these little boogans are actually dead people that the tall man has taken and turned into dwarves
Yeah.
that are his servants. And we'll talk about why later.
Oh, there's a very good plot
There's
reason.
a very good reason
They
why.
explain it all flawlessly.
And I was like, oh, of course.
Yeah.
We'll get to that.
The car chase did feel like a bit of a little more money would have gotten him there. Because the idea of being chased by a car with no driver and shooting at it out of panic, I think, is a good one. And they don't quite get there, I think, because it's really hard to film a car chase for $80 with your mom's car.
Yeah.
And so they just kind of have to say it. They're like, there's no driver. And meanwhile, you're watching, you're like, is there?
I can't really see what's going on, so...
Okay.
The best part is once they actually, like, kill the boogans,
Yeah.
they're like, we call Reggie. Tell him to bring the ice cream truck. I'm like, call the cops!
Reggie. We got one of them.
What are you talking about?
There's no cops.
Why would you, like, just at this point, you've done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
You just defended yourself. It's so early in the movie, you can still call the police. They're like, get Reggie. Get the ice cream truck.
Reg? Bring your truck.
Yeah.
So they do, and they throw the corpse of the boogans
Of Tommy, who's their friend.
Jesus. You didn't tell me the dwarf was Tommy. Hell, we buried him on Monday and look what they did to him.
Oh yeah, in the back of the ice cream truck and lock it. Reggie's concerned that he might leak on the ice cream.
This guy's not gonna leak all over my ice cream, is he?
That whole sequence, though, before we kind of move on, mausoleum, exploring the mausoleum, both brothers doing it, I thought was great. I thought it was genuinely interesting. I was curious what they'd find. It was actually scary. There was tension. I like all the shots of them wandering around the mausoleum. It's a very creepy setting. The set design's excellent.
Definitely the most effective part of the movie is the kind of unknown aspect. And while they're investigating the tall man, investigating the mausoleum, it does a good job of not answering any questions for you and just really letting your imagination go wild, making it feel like a dream. That's the thing this movie does the best, for sure.
Because this point in the movie is where you get your Bagul scene. Vincent D'Onofrio shows up at this point. He's like, well, the tall man actually used to work at the mortuary back in 1492, and his whole family died in a fire. They don't do that. Vincent D'Onofrio does not show up.
Nope.
We don't get explanations.
They couldn't afford any extras. But funnily enough, the next scene is the closest you get to that.
Is this Reggie's house? The house with the fireplace. Where are they?
I think isn't it the antique store? They say something about going to
That's later.
Okay, whatever.
Because they go to this house, and then Reggie walks in after the brothers, and he's walking down a hallway, and then a lady walks up to him and is like, oh, and he's like, oh, you scared me. It's just you. And I'm like, who's she?
Yeah,
And
she
then
has
they're
not been there yet.
And then they're sitting at a grand fireplace, But the brother's house is kind of just your typical suburban home, and I'm like, where are they?
Well, one of my biggest notes for this movie is just that there's no object permanence. This is kind of what it would feel like being a dog, where you just are somewhere.
There's no sense of place at all, except for the mausoleum.
Yeah.
Like, that's a location. Everything else in the movie is just, like, wandering around.
You're either in a mausoleum or not in the mausoleum. And that's and this house is not the mausoleum.
So they're having this, I wrote down, a little fireside chat. One of my favorite lines in the movie, which is where Jodie says, I just can't figure out why they're taking these bodies and crushing them down to half size.
But I just can't figure out why. Why they're taking these bodies and crushing them down to half size. Crush them.
And I was like, that's a great question, actually. I don't know either why they are doing that. So they come up with a plan.
Right.
We're going to kill the tall man. We're not going to call the police. We're going to kill the tall man.
Yep.
What we gotta do is we gotta snag that tall dude and stomp the out of him, and we'll find out what the hell is going on up there.
And we're going to take Mike to the antique store.
Right.
Which has not been an established location yet in the movie, and it's run by two women we've never met.
You gotta keep him safe.
You gotta keep him safe. So Mike goes to the antique store. As much as I make fun of this because it wasn't established, the antique store is a great set. Spooky, Halloween-y vibes.
Not a set, just a real antique store.
Just a real antique store, for sure. But he finds a photo of the tall man. This is the most tall man exposition we get. It's not even that. A photo of the tall man that moves. That was great. I thought that was a great effect. It was actually spooky.
Yep.
I was getting It vibes.
Yep.
Very Pennywise.
This was absolutely one of the 3 or 4 little isolated vignettes that was really, really effective.
Also a great effect for 79. Like I would not have guessed they could have pulled that off so seamlessly, especially because the photo stops moving in a new freeze frame as if the photo was just that originally. It was really nice.
And you don't even know. Like you genuinely don't know if it's just Mike's imagination or if it's the tall man messing about or if you don't know.
You don't know. Then they immediately leave the antique store.
Yep.
Mike's like, after seeing the photo, he's like, oh, my brother's in danger. We gotta go get him. So then the 2 ladies that we've never met before that took him in drive him back to Mornings to meet up with his brother. And I was like, why did they go to the antique store?
The middle hour of this movie is just the characters splitting up and getting back together because the plot demands them to have scenes alone and then together again.
Yep.
And this is just they're just bouncing back and forth. Jodie, I gotta leave. Michael, you go over there. Now come back. Now go over there. Now come back. And that's the whole plot from like minute 10 to minute 80.
Well, in a lot of like 80s horror especially, there's a lot of wandering around the woods. Like even Friday the 13th, it's like campers at a campfire talking about stuff and then they go off and have sex and wander around. There's a lot of like dead time, but it's all like at a summer camp, so it all feels just kind of cohesive. But in this one, it's like everyone has weird jobs, it is weird age gaps, it is going to like weird places.
And no like motivation. It's not like a normal, like they're not working at a summer camp.
No. And it's like, you're going to the antique store at night, but it's still open? Because they're like, oh, we better close up. And it's like 2 like young, hot women running an antique store.
Classic set.
Anyway, I'm giving it a hard time. I actually love all these little details because like, I was stimulated the entire movie. Like, this is fun to me. If they did just do the default thing, this movie would not have been as interesting or fun to watch. Like, that's how I feel about it. Like, going to a creepy old antique store, even if it makes no sense how they got there, I'd rather they do that than just wander around in the dark woods and do nothing. Like, I appreciate the effort.
I believe you that this is very high tier amongst B movies that are weird, made for a low budget, and are old-timey. I kind of was wishing I was watching a real movie.
This is a real movie. Don't listen to him. This is a real movie.
So then Michael and the girls drive back again to go meet up with Jodie as they've split up once more. And they get carjacked
by
more boogans. Michael gets thrown out the back window.
Which is great.
It's a very, very funny scene. And the girls are just gone. We'll talk about...
They come back later, kind of. And also, before they get attacked, they've stopped because they see Reggie's ice cream trucks flipped over.
Oh, right.
That's why they stopped. So Reggie's, at this point, presumed dead because his car is knocked over. The back of the truck where the boogans was locked in with the ice cream is unlocked and has clearly escaped. So we don't know what's happened to Reggie.
Jodie has finally had enough of Mike just randomly bouncing place to place. So he hauls him up into his bedroom.
Locks him.
Fireman carries him up and throws him in his room, locks the door and jams it with a screwdriver.
Which seems safer than the antique store.
Yeah. I mean, they got to try
So-
something. Nobody can stay anywhere.
No,
And then there's a 10-minute scene of right out of MacGyver.
this is amazing.
I have no idea why this is in the movie.
This is
but
so amazing. He builds a shotgun using a shotgun shell and a hammer and some scotch tape.
And they did, fair enough. Earlier on, there was a shotgun that Jody walks up and just pumps a couple times. Michael was scared.
To like empty it.
Yeah, and so they set up that there's shotgun shells laying around, and then Jody just sits there, and there's a scene that I really, for a second, because he's like looking down at it and pushing a pushpin
was
into
ready.
the back. I'm like, they're not gonna.
They're not.
Don't.
I didn't know if they were gonna have him accidentally fired in his own face. I was like, I don't know how the rest of the movie goes if that happens, but I was ready for it.
This movie is non-linear and inconsistent enough that they could have.
Yeah.
You bought it,
Yeah.
but he doesn't.
I also think it's doubly set up because they establish he's a good mechanic and he fixes cars even at
Yep.
his young age. So it kind of makes sense that he would know how to do this to
Yeah.
like, or at least give it a shot.
And his brother's very into guns, so he knows how
Yeah.
shotgun shells work.
But the scene of him swinging the hammer to blow up the door handle,
Great.
I laugh out loud by myself in my
To
bedroom.
be clear, not the door handle. He goes 6 inches right of the door handle.
So that he can reach through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect plan. There's no notes. So this scene, amongst a few scenes, is one of the most interesting to me in terms of I want to hear the director talk about why it's in the movie. This and the fortune teller. It's like, I guess after the 5th time, Jody has tried to tell Michael not to come with him, and he's just come with him. That you kind of have to raise the stakes a little bit. Maybe that was it. Maybe the only props they had were shotgun shells. I don't, like the motivation for, like this is a pretty effective scene on the scale of this movie, but you just watch it and you're like, what?
Yeah. Any other movie, he ties his bed sheets together and goes out the window.
Nothing to do with the tall man here. Nothing to do with the central mystery. Not like kind of character-y, but like not really. It's not established that like Jody is particularly protective of Michael.
No.
It's just,
But this is where I talk about iconography. If you want your movie to be remembered, you have your kid blow up his door with a shotgun shell. You don't have him climb out the window with a bedsheet. That's how you make a movie that sticks in people's memories. And this guy, like, at every point he had a chance to make that type of decision, he made the interesting one.
yeah,
And I got to give him credit for that. Like,
That's fair enough.
I love that he just went for it. You know what I mean? I feel like they don't really make movies like this.
no.
Because any committee is going to be like, don't do that. Mike escapes his room and then is proven immediately wrong as to why he should have stayed in his room because the tall man shows up and abducts him. Puts him in the back of his car.
Good villain dialogue here. He says something.
Something spooky.
I gotcha.
I've been waiting for you.
Every time the tall man speaks is great. It's
Yeah.
very, like, actually kind of scary.
I would have liked to have seen a different horror movie with this guy. I don't know if he had a career in it.
Well,
but
good news, because there's 5 more with him in it playing the tall man. So we can go down the whole barrel if you want
the
to.
next 5 deep dives. Buckle up.
What the hell is going on?
I love that when he's in the car, he has a pistol. Again, the guns come back. He just starts shooting
Yeah.
off in the car. And eventually is successful because he shoots through the car and it blows up one of the wheels, which causes the car to crash.
Well, he shoots out the back window.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh great, he's gonna escape out the back window.
not enough.
No.
Then he shoots the tire out.
Yeah.
Then he jumps out the window.
And the car crashes. I imagine that was a miniature. It was still a pretty good explosion.
This is another laugh out loud moment for me watching when the car hits like a...
This was like a Family Guy moment.
Yeah.
Where it crashes into a telephone pole at like 8 miles an hour. And it's like an
Terminator
A-bomb.
explosion. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really... It reminds... I feel like in a lot of these low-budget movies, when you go for the pyrotechnics, they don't really know how to gauge the level of explosion,
Yeah.
and you get one take.
Yeah.
So it's like, you're just gonna put it in and see what happens.
And I mean, at this point in the movie, no part of you thinks the tall man has suffered any harm. You've already seen his hands cut off and, interestingly, grow back.
Yeah.
You do see all of his fingers in the scene before. So you're just like, all right, you bought a minute. You bought long enough to get into the mortuary by blowing him up in a spectacular explosion.
I also thought it was funny that he jumps out the back window, and it's like a fine stunt. Like, it's actually clearly like a guy leaping out of a window, and then it looks pretty good. But I wrote, it's weird that it happens twice within 5 minutes. This keeps happening where, like, something crazy happens, and then it happens twice 5 minutes later.
Yeah.
Both brothers investigating Morningside. Him jumping out a window twice. It's like, it's it's just very strange.
I mean, if you really wanted to take the artsy, pretentious explanation of this movie, which I think we'll get into a little bit later. I mean, there's a lot of ways you could intellectualize this as kind of the effect it has on you watching it, and I think repeating beats is a bit of a dream sequence type thing.
Yeah, feels meditative.
I think that's a stretch, but I think you could get there.
Yeah, I don't think that's why I did it.
No.
It was effective for that reason for me, but it's not. I don't think it's intentional. So finally, both the brothers are at Morningside.
Right.
Jody's went there. Michael's escaped out the car. He also gets there. Again, guns come in clutch because Jody blows up the silver ball with a shotgun. Which, again, in any other movie, that does not work.
No.
That does not work. The silver ball is a magical ghost thing. It does not but the shotgun actually works.
It just is vaporized immediately, and then they move on.
They discover that the corpse of their father, because their parents were buried at Morningside, and they established earlier, if they're turning the corpses into boogans, what about mom and dad? And their dad's body is not in the coffin. I did think this was setting up that they'd see their parents as boogans later.
And maybe it did in the 4-hour cut or in the higher budget cut.
But it doesn't happen. There's no boogans. It's fine. It establishes that, like, the threat that any of these boogans could be your parents, which is scary enough for a kid, that concept.
There's this door down here. And I'll bet there's something behind it.
We then find Reggie.
Yeah, Reggie shows back up.
After his ice cream truck was flipped, I thought he was a goner. And then he shows back up. Not only that, he explains away all the holes in the movie by saying he found the girls and freed them, and now they're gone and won't be in the movie anymore.
I found Sally and Sue and a couple other girls that I never even saw before. I snuck them out a window and they took off through the bushes like scared rabbits.
Yeah, which I was like, I wrote my notes, I'm like, certainly, this is the tall man, disguised as Reggie.
Oh, you were way overthinking.
Saying something to placate them, right? It's like, I found the girls, I saved them, they're totally fine, and now we can just go investigate what's behind this door. I'm like, the second they get behind that door, Scooby-Doo masks off, Reggie with the tall man. No, Reggie actually saved the girls off screen. We saw none of it. Keeping in mind, the girls are women we didn't know that ran the antique store, so it wouldn't have been interesting to watch.
Assuming, like, the director and Jody's girlfriends who had to be in the movie for one scene.
But also, certainly, the 4-hour cut showed Reggie saving the girls.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yep, so Reggie shows back up, and then they walk into the very Twin Peaks-y white room full of barrels.
It's Twin Peaks-y, but this doubled down on the Dune for me.
Yeah.
This looked like a set from Dune. All the black barrels with little weird mirrors in them and like...
That's fair enough. And budgetary constraint or leaving it to your imagination, you decide. But they tell you that all these barrels contain dwarves. One of them peeks in there and they're like, oh yeah, there's dwarves in there.
I think it's Reggie or Jody leans down and goes, geez, dwarves.
Yeah.
Dwarves.
Every line of dialogue is delivered by someone who doesn't speak English. I don't know how.
Despite being written and acted by all Americans.
And then the big sci-fi moment, the most interesting moment of the movie. I don't even know how you talk about it.
I don't know how we start talking about this.
We may just need to show it. But there's these two metal poles that Michael finds out that if he puts his hand, it like vanishes and is going into like an alternate dimension or something.
It's a portal.
Yeah, it's a portal. And then he sticks his head in, and it's Tatooine.
Or Arrakis, or Hell, it's a red planet.
Yeah.
It's a red planet. He sees all the dwarves marching single file over the horizon.
Which was right out of, like I want to say Star Wars, but right out of Spaceballs.
Yeah. Maybe Star Wars, maybe something, but they look through this portal, and it is a space planet.
Yep.
Jody pulls Michael back out, and Michael tells us how he's figured out what the dwarves are for. Oh my God. And I had to write it down because it was a little bit confusing. The dwarves are slaves who need to be crushed into small people because of the gravity and the heat on the planet that they are slaves on.
They're using them for slaves. The dwarves.
I laughed when they said this. I laughed writing it down. I laughed thinking about it, and I'm laughing now. The heat.
And they gotta crush them because of the gravity and the heat.
That's what
The
gets
heat.
me.
It's so hot, they have to be small. I was like, this was not on my bingo card. If you given me 100 guesses for what was going on at the mausoleum, them being space slaves who need to be crushed to withstand the gravity and heat.
Yeah. And these guys are all ready to go.
Never in a million years would I have guessed this.
Oh my goodness. And you can tell Don Cascatelli, whatever it is, he did read Dune and he loves it. And he wanted to get this low budget, tiny California town movie right to Arrakis.
Yep.
And oh man.
I love this.
This was absolutely my favorite part of the movie.
I love this because it's so crazy, but why not? Right? You're writing and directing this movie. You can put anything there. Anything else you do has been done by 5 million movies before.
Yep.
I love that he was just like, wouldn't it be cool if this happened? And it really feels like something a kid would dream up, in a good way.
You have to think, where at any point does the plot necessitate that these are dwarves?
The heat.
Oh, right. I forgot about the heat.
And they gotta crush them because of the gravity and the heat.
It's too hot.
It's too hot for them to be tall.
I think what happened is they had the iconography of hooded henchmen. Because the whole movie I'm watching and I'm like, you got your hooded little goblins, little gremlins. That happens in a lot of movies, but you never need to explain them. It's not a plot point. It's just like your bad guy has henchmen.
Yeah.
And they're kind of, hooded little figures.
Yeah.
And you're never going to talk about it, and that's fine, because there's always a henchman to a bad guy.
Sure.
So I didn't think twice about it. But once you introduce this, it makes them part of the plot in a very specific way, and now it's like, wait, now it's weird that they're dwarves.
Yeah.
Like, no one was asking questions, and you went ahead and made it weird, but it also made it very interesting. I gotta give big props to the guy for...
Yeah, that switch flipped. I'm gonna be honest. I was having a miserable time with this movie, basically up until this scene.
Really?
Kinda. And all of a sudden, I really perked up, and I was like, oh, well, an idea. and that was a lot of fun. And I mean, yeah, that's not something that's happened in a lot of movies. And the horror of there's a spooky man with a ball. Okay, is what it is. The horror of being crushed into a little dwarf corpse man so that you have to be a slave on this very hot, high gravity planet. All of a sudden, I'm scared again. I'm in.
Yeah. Kudos to you.
Oh my god.
Sir. Whatever you're... kudos to you, Don.
Yeah.
This is crazy. And it makes me so much more curious about the sequels.
Yeah.
Because surely they must go into this more. I was ready for the third act after this. They go through the portal and they're on the planet. But that's it. You just see the one glimpse, and then the rest of the movie is just back in the town. Like, they don't go there.
Any more time spent there would have made it worse.
It would have.
It would have.
But any other movie, you go there, and the final act is in that movie.
And this is the door to their planet.
Yeah.
So now that we have our backstory established, and we fully understand the tall man, who he is, where he came from, and what his motivations are, because he needs a tiny slave army for his very hot, heavy planet.
Yep.
Now we have our hero moment from Reggie, Joe Latrulio.
I love that he became like a main character.
Yeah.
In the beginning of the movie, I was like, oh, this is going to be the guy they kill off early so they don't have to kill off the main cast. He's like kind of the lead by this point, like more so than Jodie.
Yeah, and he's great. And now we have that moment we set up. Reggie, earlier in the movie, when he's playing guitar, uses a tuning fork, which is, that checks the box. They have set this up. And they cut back to that. They show it again so you remember that he knows what a tuning fork is. And he sees these two metal posts that make up a dimension portal to the hot, heavy world. And he knows what you do with a tuning fork is you put both hands on top of the posts. And that turns it off.
It's like the anti-setup and payoff.
Yeah.
Because they set it up and they pay it off in a way that has nothing to do with the setup, but they thought it did.
Right.
Because, first of all, why would a tuning fork have anything to do with this? Also, he doesn't do the thing you do to a tuning fork.
No.
Tuning forks you like hit and they make a resonating frequency. He just puts his hands on them as if he's like conducting electricity.
You could assume maybe that it is resonating and he stops it, and that's all it takes is putting your hand on it.
That could be.
That's kind of what I thought.
Whoa, big Phantasm fan over here.
This is my favorite movie.
What a nerd.
I've watched all the videos. I'm deep in the lore.
And you know what? Some credit to that theory is that while this is all going on, there is like a slowly decreasing pitch.
Mm-hmm.
That's just like a droning pitch. And I could see how a guy who's a musician, the only thing you can think of is that's somehow important. I'm going to try to do something.
I love the idea that the tall man has to walk up and like bong this thing together to like check on everyone. He like sticks his head in. He's like, quit walking around and
pick up the pace over there.
Yeah, lift all those rocks. They don't establish what they're doing on this hot, heavy planet.
No.
But just walking in a line off into the horizon.
That's all you need.
But so Reggie shuts off the portal, kinda, but it creates a vacuum. And this was one of the most unintentionally funny scenes for me. I don't know if you got this, but Reggie, like, to establish that it's very windy now, that the portal is like sucking in air, all these like barrels start falling on him. And the camera is like shaking, but it's clearly there's just two people standing off screen just hucking barrels at him, which made me laugh really hard. And I don't know if you noticed this. There's a scene right after this where he's got a big red welt on his forehead. And I looked it up and they actually just beamed him with a barrel. And that's exactly what happened.
That's movie magic for you.
Oh my God.
That's so funny.
Because I just had this moment of picturing them filming this where it's just like the director and Jody just whipping barrels at Reggie like, look like it's windy.
So the portal's closed. It gets windy. There's some good Star Trek acting when the ship's going down. This. Also, speaking of which, the house vanishes into like a puff of light.
And is beamed up.
Yeah, and the special effects guy who did that effect was the guy who did the beaming effects on Star Trek. So it's not even a coincidence.
That's good.
Reggie, unfortunately, sees the woman in the blue dress, which is probably the same, I assume the same woman the whole time, the woman in lavender.
Yep.
And she stabs Reggie and kills him. Jody and Michael are like, we can't save him, and they run away.
At this point, like, it's supposed to be emotional, and I really do like Reggie here, but the movie's just gone so far off the rails, I'm like, who cares? Like,
yeah.
They just go back to a regular old murder, and I'm like, show me the hot, heavy world
Show me
again.
the space dwarves, please. Yeah. It's got a pretty fantastic finale plan here.
Yeah.
Because Jody says, we got to get rid of the tall man. Let's lure him to the mine shaft. I'll get rid of all the signs that say caution mine shaft so that he doesn't know it is, and then he'll fall in it. And we'll roll a big rock on top so he's stuck. And I mean, fair enough. If shotguns work, maybe this will work too. But this plan to me was so funny, and there had to be a scene in the 4-hour cut where they show the mine in the first 10 minutes. They're walking by. Oh, the old mine up there. You know, that shaft goes 500 feet deep. In the last 7 minutes of the movie to be like, there's a 1,000-foot mine over here. Let's go lure him in. I was like, what the
I'm gonna haul ass over there and get rid of that warning barrier around the mine shaft and camouflage it.
Tells Mike to get out of the car and go back home to do something.
For the 13th time this movie.
Yeah, just
get out of here, Mike. You don't want none of this
Look, you go in and try and find some more ammo.
Mike goes home and is attacked by the tall man. This is probably my favorite visual sequence in the entire movie. Because the tall man shows up at the house, the door flies open, and he goes, boy! Boy!
Yeah.
And that is that's your pitch for this whole movie. That scene, that visual of the tall man in the door, I don't know where, but I've seen that. Right. That's your iconography, right? Mm-hmm. He gets chased around. Him getting chased through the woods is great. The tall man's like stalking after him, strutting all powerful.
You play a good game, boy, but the game is finished. Now you die.
And then Mike gets his feet grabbed by like zombie hands coming out of the muck. He sees the woman in lavender in the trees with a knife.
Mm-hmm.
It's very creepy. This whole part was like genuinely really great for me as like a little horror set piece of someone being chased through the woods. And this is normally your boring scene.
Yeah.
Chased through the woods, you're like, I can't see what's going on. I don't know what's going on. This was like creative and cool. The score is going. The tall man's walking around. I thought this was great. And then it ends in a very Looney Tunes moment where they do lure him into the mine shaft.
Yep.
Which is like a hole they dug that day.
Yeah, that's like 2 feet deep.
And
yeah.
Jody rolls a boulder from like 1,000 meters away that plugs up the mine shaft.
And
with
he
the
eats
tall
a
man.
carrot and says, "Yeah, what's up, Doc?"
Yeah. But it immediately cuts to, right? Is there anything?
No, I think that's immediately they go back to it's Michael and Reggie by the fireplace in Reggie's house, I guess.
Some house.
And well, see what I put in my notes is that it's all a dream, and then it's not all a dream.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what the last 2 scenes are, because you have Michael and Reggie. Reggie is consoling Michael as if he just woke up from a bad dream, and basically tells him this entire movie's been a dream sequence. It was all a bad dream. It's not real. Your parents and Jody died in the car crash, but I'm going to take good care of you now. Which, please cut in the scene of the kid talking to Sloth from the Goonies, because that's exactly what I got.
You're with me now.
Yeah.
You're going to live with me now.
And it gives you about 4 seconds to be like, wait, so the movie never happened? And then Michael walks a few feet away.
Up to his bedroom.
Up to his bedroom. And then the tall man pops back out and says, "Boy!"
And gets him and we cut to credits.
And that's the movie.
I normally hate It Was All a Dream endings.
Yeah.
This one actually really worked for me. Because the movie is so weird and kind of dreamlike anyways,
yeah,
it makes more sense that it was a dream than that it wasn't.
It does.
Second of all, I talked about theme at the beginning. To me, this movie is about a boy overcoming trauma.
Yeah.
And defeating the tall man is basically him finally, conquering his fears.
Mm-hmm.
And the scene with the psychic establishes that. It's like, you're fearful, you need to conquer your fears. Fear is the mind killer.
Yeah.
So if this whole story is a parable or an allegory for a boy overcoming trauma, overcoming his fears, and being able to move on with his life as an orphan and not have that cloud his entire life.
Yeah.
It makes sense it was a dream. And then the kind of was it all a dream final stinger makes it so you're at least left with kind of it's up to the viewer. You get to decide if it was a dream or not, but it works either way. It didn't feel like a cop-out. It actually improved the movie to me. I'm curious how you felt about it.
So I agree, and I think that was probably the most satisfying thing they could have done to explain why there was no object permanence in this movie and why everything was just nonsense and there was repeated beats. The fact that it was all a kid's dream as he's trying to process trauma is probably... It was the best explanation for the events up to that point, and I agree that it was the best use of a dream sequence that maybe I've ever seen. It did work. And I think that there are interpretations that I'm sure there's video essays out there, and I'm sure a lot of the people who love this movie would talk about how it all makes sense and there is all logic and that this all represents stuff, and that the tall man is essentially death taking away his parents and his brother, and it's scary, and then it isn't.
But also corrupting it. That the corpses of your parents, he's even taken those.
Yeah.
He's ruined this entire thing for you.
It makes sense, except that there's a hell planet with space dwarves and little spheres. And it just, I can't quite get all of that to hold water.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think it was fine. And it was a clever ending, and it was a decent payoff for kind of the setup of a lot of the movie being as weird as it was. One thing I wanted to talk about here is that, interestingly, I think in a lot of ways this movie is the opposite of Hell House for me. And let me explain what I mean by that.
Yeah, I'm curious.
So, Hell House, the first movie we reviewed, low-budget horror movie, did some things very well, and then fumbled the bag a little bit.
At the end?
Had really, really great characters, very believable, consistent world, very, very logical order, and I was really sucked in. And then at the end was nothing. It was a bit of a wet fart.
Right.
And it was boring, and then kind of the tension was gone once you saw that it was three kids in a trench coat, and that was it. This movie, the more I think about it, basically everything Hell House did great, this movie didn't even bother with. And then all the things that Hell House did not do a good job of were awesome about this movie. Because boy is the ending surprise in this movie something. But also, boy do I not care about any of the characters in this movie at any point.
No. No.
And nor is there any believable dialogue. And the tension comes from such different places. Because the tension in Hell House is so much about you like these characters, right? And it's this very human thing. You feel like you're standing there with somebody, with your friends, your siblings, your roommates. Whereas in Phantasm, it looks like you're watching aliens on a strange planet about to be attacked by like some creature that you've never heard of. And it's like complete polar opposites in how they create the spooks and how... And I was just kind of interested thinking about these two movies because you watch way more B-horror than I do, right? I have not seen a lot of like mid-budget, low-budget horror movies, and so I don't have a lot of comparison points. But I just, the more I thought about it, the more those two movies kind of sit at the opposite end of every spectrum when it comes to mid-budget horror.
I think that's a great point. And it'd be interesting, like, if this movie just had great, well-written characters, I don't even know how it would work.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it's going for the psychedelic. It almost feeds into it, but it is a detriment. It's like the characters are not well written. The dialogue is very strange. It's at points so bad it's good funny.
Yeah.
But it's not like compelling dialogue. That's a really good point. I would never have put those two things together. We gotta get these two directors to team, because they're both still around. Hell House 4 is coming out this Halloween. They could team up and make Hell House, Phantasm a crossover event and make the greatest movie ever made.
If we've inspired that, we can close down the channel. We've done it.
That would be the epitome of our channel if we could orchestrate something like that.
Wow, that would be special, but...
Oh my God.
Who is that? Oh, Paul. How'd you do it?
I think it's time. Scoring! Scoring on a deep dive. Scoring on a deep dive. It was my pick, which means Avery's gonna start, and as you all know, our loyal viewers here on Deep Dive, we're gonna do our critical scoring, followed by our personal scoring. I think we might have some very different scorings going on at this point. So, probably I'll just say, because you're gonna go first, probably my biggest delta in a personal to critical.
Okay.
But I think that makes sense for this kind of movie.
I'm very interested to hear.
So, Avery, start us off with your critical score for Phantasm.
And it is very challenging to give this a critical score. This is not a conventional movie. This does not do a lot of the conventional movie things. It does not even bother. And the ones that it does try, it's a little murky, whether it's a complete lack of effort or a failure. Short version, I'm going to give it a critical C+. It's a grade I gave Hell House, and I think it's fair that it's about the same level of a filmmaking achievement. I think there are some things that it does really well, but I think on the whole, this is just... It's some really good bits held together by Scotch tape in a lot of ways, and I think that... I don't know, both my reviews are fairly harsh, and they reflect how I feel about the movie. I completely understand and would not find any fault with someone giving this way, way higher scores. I'm sure this is very effective for some people. Through my lens, most of the movies I watch are modern. Most of my sensibilities are modern. The type of movie I like is not really old B horror. That's not really my scene. This is just, I just couldn't escape that this is 30% of a movie in a lot of ways. And so that's why I'm going with a C+ critic.
Disagree on the 30%. Let it be noted. But I think your actual scoring is pretty fair. I think that's kind of what I would expect it to come in at. Why don't you go right into your personal?
So my personal, I did have to bump it down. So the more I talk about it, the more I do find interesting bits, and I'm enjoying talking about it. I gave it a C- when I finished it, which is kind of... I think the line I put in for C- is stretching the definition of movie. I didn't have a great time watching this. It just isn't for me. I mean, I didn't like Twin Peaks, and I think Twin Peaks, especially like some of the later parts of Twin Peaks, are just a directly better version of this, and I didn't like it and enjoy watching it. Like just this surrealist dream sequence, your feet aren't under you, you don't understand the narrative, and you're kind of having a hard time picking, well, I'm kind of having a hard time picking out what is ineptitude on the filmmaker's part versus intentionally unsettling. I get it. I get the idea behind it. I don't like it. I don't enjoy watching it. And I am going to give the director less and the filmmakers less credit than most people would. This is just not my kind of thing.
Sure. So I'm curious, what keeps this floating above D for you?
That there were a couple of cool ideas in it. I do have to admit the twist of it being a crazy sci-fi world, and also that it is a dream. It's just enough threads that holds it together as a movie. If they had fumbled that last 10 minutes, and it had been that the tall man is just a spooky man, and there wasn't that dream sequence, like even if you just like say just cut it before they get to the White Room with the barrels. Yeah, this is firmly a D. This is firmly a like, I'm working really hard not to go on my phone, and I'm just having not a good time watching this. And by the end I go, that was dumb, and that would have been it. They pull it back, they offer some explanations, they give me some thinking material where I actually did get excited to talk about this. And yeah, I'm playing it over a little in my head. I don't think I'll ever rewatch this or tell anyone to. But yeah, that's what gets it above a D and up into the kind of C- for me.
Realm, right?
And I would expect a lot of people would have it much higher than me. I'm sure some of our lovely viewers and commenters really enjoyed this movie and love the idea that it's a dream sequence and think that a lot of these things I'm describing as flaws feed into that. And that's a totally, totally fine interpretation. I take no problem with that. It's just not what I got from watching this movie.
And that's what we're doing here in the Green Corner. It's talking about what we liked. So
Yeah.
There's no wrong answers. And actually, I'll jump into my critical score, because my critical score is B-. So
Okay.
we're basically the same. You have C+, I have B-.
Yep.
So I think from an objective standpoint, we pretty much agree on this.
Yep.
It's but the reason I went up into B is I think the strengths outweigh the weaknesses. There's not really good characters. There's not good dialogue, but it's really visually striking, which is more important to me, and it creates a strong atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
I liked watching it. I was intrigued. It's got a strong score. The tall man's a great villain. And I genuinely didn't know what the thing I was scared of the whole time was, which I always appreciate in horror. So this is like, from a critical standpoint, I think a solid movie that fumbles things, which is why it's B-.
Yeah.
It doesn't fall into C for me, but also I'm coming from the world where I've watched a lot more stuff that much deserves C in my opinion. So like this floats on top of that, and that's just more like the history of things we enjoy watching. Personally, I am going to give this an A-. I loved watching it. Anyone who likes watching movies in the way I like, anyone who's like-minded like me, like around Halloween, you're digging through all the old 80s stuff, some 70s stuff, trying to find classics, you're looking for diamonds in the rough. This is the crown jewel of that search. It's not the best movie, it's not an A+ of that world,
Right.
but it's an A-. This is what you're hoping to find. This is what you watch 15 movies, and this is the one that stands out, that has like genuinely cool ideas and really strong filmmaking, like visual filmmaking. And I really loved watching it. I want to check out more of them.
Yeah.
I found it strong and atmospheric to the point that it's a rewatch for me, and I think we've kind of both agreed. If it falls into rewatch,
Yeah.
it falls into A.
Pretty much.
It's A- because it's a lot of its weaknesses are still there. Like the dialogue's not strong, it doesn't really make sense. There's a portion in the middle where you're kind of like don't have a ton of scary sequences or stuff with the tall man. It's just like the brothers going to the bar and walking around, and it got a little dry. If it had played more into its strengths and went, for me, even more surreal and more dream sequency and more the tall man pursuing you in the woods with neon lighting, I think it would have gotten even higher for me personally.
I agree.
Some of those dry bits fall into A-. But yeah, I loved watching it. I'm excited to check out the rest. And it's better than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Avery, who is your MVP for Phantasm?
I gotta give it to Reggie Bannister, man.
Okay.
He was just out here hustling. So Reggie Bannister is the actor's name. Reggie is the character's name. I think there's a lot of directions you could go with the MVP, but when I sat down and thought about who just put in the most work for this movie and it was more of an underdog story, because I think you didn't really expect much from him. I don't even know if I expected him to show back up after the first scene. And he like solves everything and ends up having like some emotional moments and experiencing some growth and pays off some setup. And he's just a little sweetie.
He saves some women off screen.
And he's the kind of bald where a guy that bald hasn't been a good guy since 1984. And so I just like when I get to see, you know, that's the kind of guy Harrison Ford throws off his plane.
Yes.
After then. So I'm just happy he got his little moment.
I also think it's fair to say he's the best actor, other than the tall man.
I mean, the tall man. Acting.
He's an enigma.
He's
but
effective.
Of the characters, the people in the town, I think Reggie's probably the most effective.
Yeah, I think so.
He felt the most like a real guy.
I definitely thought about Angus Scrim at a certain point. He's a very spooky-looking man who delivered dialogue angrily.
Yeah.
And I think Reggie did more.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's a great MVP.
Yeah.
I have to give it my MVP to Don Cascarelli.
No.
I love this movie. He wrote and directed it. I gotta give him props.
Mm-hmm.
The MVP, the reason it was a lock is he didn't only write and direct, but he was the cinematographer and editor, which is crazy.
He did everything.
He did everything. He was almost killed on set for this movie.
And he was like 22? I remember seeing this. He was
really
younger
young.
than I thought.
Yeah. And he was almost killed because when they were doing the car chase with the guns, he was filming it and had no idea that at that range, blanks could kill you. And they were shooting blanks, and he was like this far from the barrel of the shotgun to get the shot of the gun.
Yeah.
He was renting the stuff on weekends. This guy, like, he put his heart and soul into this. I need to give him props. He made this little gem of a movie. There's probably never made anything like this again, except the other 5 ones in the trilogy, or the series, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, good job, Don. You did it. I know it's a little boring, just give it writer-director. I usually do something really wacky, but this guy had to get some props.
If I had loved the movie, that would have been mine too.
And they gotta crush him because of the gravity and the heat.
Well, that was Phantasm.
I'd be really interested to hear your guys' comments and thoughts, maybe more than any other video we've done. I'm just curious to hear other perspectives on this movie because I think it is so different from other movies.
Yeah.
In an interesting way that clearly works for some people and doesn't work for other people.
And if this movie came on when you were 10 years old, I bet this would leave a lasting impression.
You'd probably like genuinely block it out. Like you probably would just like think it was a bad dream.
I think you would remember moments. There'd be things stuck in your head forever.
But you wouldn't be sure if it's a real movie. You certainly wouldn't be able to like explain it to someone or like look it up.
It feels like one of those movies you find and you're like, oh, that movie.
Yeah.
Like that like heavy nostalgia trip where you're like, I thought I just made that up. Or like, I never thought I'd figure out what it was.
Boy.
If you like watching us talk about movies like Phantasm or anything else, like and subscribe. This is the end of our spooky October, which was a blast. We watched a lot of fun spooky stuff.
We're never gonna do horror content on this channel ever again. So I hope you enjoyed it.
Or maybe next week.
We don't know.
So yeah, like and subscribe. We appreciate all you hanging out. And you know, have a happy Halloween. Don't get got by any tall men. Don't get killed by silver orbs in your forehead.
Or little mustard finger wasps.
Don't get mustard fingered wasps. Don't get attacked by a boogans. And particularly, don't get squashed down into a small version of yourself and sent through a portal to a hot, heavy planet to be a slave.
But if you have to be a slave on a hot, heavy planet,
this would be
You better be short. You better be short is all I'm saying. It's going to be too hot.
It's hot. It's too hot if you're tall. That's how science is. Don't you know that?